What's shaking, drinks fans? Eric from the Modern Bar Cart podcast here. This video chronicles a fun experiment that I conducted by soaking a small charred oak barrel in seawater so that it became a salt cured cask. What I did is I then allowed that to dry. I filled it with white rum and aged it for over a month before finally filtering it and tasting it. This is part of a larger presentation that I'm giving at the 2026 ADI Rum Summit in South Beach, and I'll explain more about the thinking and flavors behind this process as we get into it. So thanks for tuning in, and if you enjoyed this little experiment, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, because when it comes to fun flavor experiments, I'm just getting started. So enjoy learning about this salt-cured rum, and thanks for tuning in. Cheers. All right, everybody. Welcome to a beautiful day here in Avalon, New Jersey. We're going out to get some salt in a barrel. Still an outgoing tide here, so we're gonna see if we can make it through the bridge from around slack tide, then head into the ocean and get this barrel salty. Let's do it. As I mentioned in the intro, less than a week after this video goes live, I'm giving a presentation on underwater barrel aging at the Rum Summit, which is part of the 2026 ADI Conference and Trade Show in South Beach. And if you weren't already aware, this is sort of a niche subject. I was able to interview the guys from the Reef Rum Supply Co, based out of the Kaona Room in Miami, who freedive small format barrels 30 feet down in the ocean and secure them to the bottom to age for several months at a time. I'll link to that interview in the description, but let's just say I don't have the diving skills or the correct maritime environment to replicate their project. What I did find, however, is a gentleman by the name of Paul Menta, who runs the Key West First Legal Rum Distillery in the Florida Keys, and he does exactly what I'm trying to do in this video, just at a larger scale. His background is as a chef, and this salt-cured cask maturation is part of what he calls his chef-first philosophy on spirits production. His claim is that the magnesium and possibly other alkaline minerals found in Caribbean sea salt act to balance out the acidic compounds that are created when the inside of an oak barrel is charred, creating a unique flavor profile that sets his products apart from other barrel-aged spirits. And that is what we're out to test here. One thing I do need to credit the guys at Reef Rum Supply with, however, is reminding me that anytime you're out on the water, or in their case, under it, something special is bound to happen. Not bad. A little slack tide action. I love it. Absolutely love it. Unfortunately, the day I went out to do this, there were whitecaps on the ocean, which is no good for a little boat like the one I was borrowing, so I headed to a sandbar just a few hundred yards from the inlet where fresh seawater was pouring in with the high tide. All right, let's go fill a barrel. Filled up and ready to go. So, we're back in the yard.
You can see here that the salt has permeated most of the barrel. We've got good coverage here. It's seeping through almost everywhere, kind of swelling the barrel from almost all sides. I'm gonna leave it laying down this way in hopes that this last bit is gonna get soaked in, and then we'll come back, we'll dump, and at that phase the barrel begins to cure. All right, so it's time to dump our barrel. We're gonna expect a little bit of char and a lot of salt water. Let's go ahead, give it a shot. Seeing a little bit of char floating here, but not too much, which is good. It's a sign of a good char 3. You don't have little bits of oak sort of flaking off like you would in a char 4, more of an alligator char situation where you've got that aggressive surface area, which is definitely not what you want in a small format barrel anyway. Nearing the end here, last few drips and drabs of seawater. And that is all she wrote. So now we're going to leave this barrel in a warm, sunny place to dry out, and so that all this water can evaporate, and then hopefully by this time tomorrow we will have a totally salt cured barrel and we'll be able to see little salt crystals inside. Okay everyone, so it's been 2 days and it is now time to move on to phase 2 of our salt cured barrel experiment here. So this barrel dried out for about 2 days, and on the inside it's completely bone dry. Hear little bits of char rattling around in there. The aroma is a little salty, but mostly you get that vanilla caramel oak character. So everything looks like it's sort of what you'd expect from what we've done so far and the materials we're sourcing. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to take this distilled water and we're going to hydrate the outside of the barrel, which is what the folks down at the Key West First Legal Rum Distillery do. Rehydrating the inside of the cask would obviously knock some of that salt loose, and some of that salt would come out with the water. So we've got the stopper in, the sort of little mini bung, as they say, and we're gonna hydrate from the outside so that it's watertight, and then we're going to fill with some rum. So let's get started with that. As you can see here, my shadow. Get our distilled water, pop the top, and I'm going to just gently hydrate the top of the bottle, top of the barrel, I should say. All right, give it a little turn here. Make sure we're getting all parts of the barrel here. We can make sure we get the heads. And obviously the reason why I'm doing this in a bucket is so that I can turn it over and sort of reuse this water. Now, the reason why I'm using distilled water here is because the tap water here in South Jersey, where I'm currently staying, tastes a little bit like chlorine, and I figured we don't want any confounds in this little experiment. So I'm gonna leave it in here, kind of wedge it down against the sides of the bucket here, and just let it hydrate from the outside as much as I can. And we're gonna leave that in there for a couple minutes, and I'm gonna get my rum opened, and then we'll proceed to filling the barrel. So here's where we stand. It is so hot outside that my devices kept shutting off. So here we are in the house, in the shade, to finish up the final phase of this project. So I've got my barrel. It's been soaking here. You can see it's nice and
shiny wet on the outside. I'm gonna go ahead and set that in its little cradle. And we're going to fill it with 2 liters of Plants Array 3 stars rum. So this is a fantastic rum for this because it is reasonably neutral. I could not find anything at the sort of beachside Jersey liquor stores that was not clear with some age and filtering on it. So instead of going completely unaged, we're going with something high quality. This is sort of a bartender's standard daiquiri rum, and reasonably neutral as well. So we're pretty high on the quality with this rum, the distillate wise, and it's also reasonably neutral. And a daiquiri is something that you might drink if you were experimenting with barrel aging a white rum at home, right? It's sort of like the first go-to test of a rum. And so I think all of these factors, even though I couldn't find something completely white and unaged without the filtering in the Spanish style, I think we're gonna be just fine using this Plants Array 3 star. So I'm gonna go ahead and start our first bottle here. Little spillage right out the gate. Not a problem, we've got plenty of rum. Got a pretty small barrel here and a pretty small funnel, so I can't do the fun little whirlpool that helps it siphon down super fast. And that should leave a little over 500 mLs from this third bottle. So about a little more than 2/3 is going in here. And we're just gonna sort of come to grips with the fact that more is gonna spill here because I don't have a perfect sense of when this barrel is gonna be ready to we must be. Oop, there it is. Well, that's a good sign. A little more is going to come out here as we put in the bung, and there we have it. A little bit of a mess was made, but we have our salt cured 2 liter level 3 charred oak cask ready to go. It is going to go into a reasonably hot, medium humidity environment to age for about 1 month, at which time I'm going to filter everything, and we'll come right back here and see what the results of this experiment give us. And then it gets packed up and it comes right along with me to the Rum Summit in Miami. We'll see you then. All right, everybody, welcome. Today is officially dump day. Yes, that's right. This is the day we dump our barrel. So it has been in our bucket for about 5 weeks now. So I'm gonna grab it out, carefully place it down here, grab our cradle, and it still feels reasonably full. Now I'm gonna grab the camera here and just show you that we've got some discoloration here, right? So we've definitely had a little bit of expansion, a little bit of leakage, but this is not what we would consider a stave leak. You'll see that it's all sort of centralized around the stopper here, so the barrel has retained its fidelity, all right? And what we're gonna do now is we are going to dump this barrel into a pitcher, and we're going to filter it out with this fine mesh sieve, and we're gonna see what it tastes like. We're gonna do a little taste test directly after that. So we're going to uncork the barrel very gently, and we are going to dump. Dump, dump, dump. decent color on this after 5 weeks. Actually, some really nice color. I'm loving that. Okay. And what every good filmmaker in the spirits world needs to remember is you got to get that shot, which means you always got to bring your camera ladle. Makes sense. All right, so we're going to do the lo-fi version of this secondary filtration. Most of the char is on the bottom anyway, but what I'm going to do is just utilize one of these fine mesh strainers. If it's good enough for a bartender, it's good enough for me. Okay, I'll add a little bit more so we get something significant to sip on here. All right, so setting this aside, what we've got is sort of what I would describe as a gold colored rum. Most gold rums on the market are going to be darker than this, or excuse me, lighter than this. So this is somewhere around the sort of color that you might expect with a rum that's got between 1 and 2 years of terrestrial age on it. So let's just go ahead with the tasting and see what we get here. On the nose, you get sort of straight up what you would expect. You get the caramel, you get the butterscotch. Now, the obvious question here is, am I getting any salinity? I think the caramel might be skewing, somewhat into the salted caramel, but remember, salinity, if you filter out sort of like the briny, more, I guess what you might call plant and animal aspects of ocean aroma, really salinity is something that you experience on your tongue, right? It's a taste, it's not a flavor. And so really to get the sense of that, we're gonna need to take a sip of this rum. So cheers to salt cured cask rum. Wow. I gotta say that what comes through on the finish is really, really nice. You definitely get a little bit of that brininess on the finish, which is a little bit unexpected. First, what came through was pretty much what you got on the nose, the vanilla, the caramel, and then the sort of hot, small barrel taste came through, right? There's a specific, very hot, kind of fiery, oaky taste, flavor rather, that comes from small format barrel aging, especially in the heat like we did this summer. So that came through second. And then as you get to this finish here, which is, rather long compared to a normal Plantaray 3-star, you're straight down the middle daiquiri rum. What I got was this really long, sort of slightly silky, slightly salty finish. It wasn't overly salty. I was expecting this to be potentially salty in a bad way, but I'll be honest, I could certainly see, having tasted this small format preparation, exactly what Paul Menta and his team down in Key West are getting at when it comes to this salt cured cask maturation, because it's not a salt bomb. It's not whatsoever. So, in my opinion, the experiment is a success. It didn't cost all that much money, and I think that the outcomes certainly warrant further investigation, certainly by potentially other craft distillers. Maybe some of the big folks even want to try this. Salt is an interesting sort of compound to play around with. It is obviously very important to the way that humans perceive flavor, and I want to thank you for indulging me on this slightly strange little rabbit hole that is salt cured cask maturation. Definitely subscribe to the Modern Bar Cart podcast anywhere you find podcasts. Give the YouTube a like and a subscription, and I'll see you soon. Cheers.